Uh, Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, I guess, still, if you're on the West Coast. I'm Dave Carter with Flower Hill Institute, and glad to have you here. We're going to have just a moment of awkward silence here while we wait for folks to get in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started here. So, all right, we'll go ahead and get underway here. As I said, I'm Dave Carter with Flower Hill Institute, along with Chris Roper. We're the two regional directors, and the topic we're going to be covering today is one that we've been dealing with extensively over the last 4 years, which is how do you become inspected under USDA or a cooperative interstate shipment program? We're really pleased. We've got uh, three guests here that are going to bring different perspectives to this topic, and we'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But first of all, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, this is being recorded, so we will have it archived on our website. If for folks that couldn't tune in today, they can download that afterwards. We'll also be linking in some of the resources that are available to that archived recording, so you can click on to some of the things that FSIS has to offer. As we go along, please submit any questions you have in the Q&A box, not the chat, in the Q&A. We're really anxious to have folks answer your questions this afternoon, so don't hesitate to do that. And then after the roundtable, you will get a quick, brief two-question survey. Number one, how did we do? What are your thoughts on this roundtable? But secondly, what are some thoughts you have on other topics you want Chris and I to cover? That a lot of the things that we're offering these days are coming up from suggestions on that. So, um, with that, I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. First of all, Robert Bain with USDA FSIS. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. So, like Dave said, my name is Robert Bain. I'm currently FSIS's Deputy Administrator for Field Operations. And so, in this role, I oversee three of the agency's program areas. That includes the Office of Field Operations, which houses our 6,500 or so inspection personnel across the country. I have the Office of Investigations, Enforcement, and Audit, which has 100 plus investigators stationed throughout the country, and they're responsible for regulating meat and poultry products in commerce after they've left those federally inspected establishments. They also audit state meat and poultry inspection programs that operate under cooperative agreement with FSIS. And they audit foreign countries that are approved to export meat and poultry to the U.S. And then I have the Office of the Chief Information Officer, which is all the IT stuff. So this is my 29th year with FSIS. I started as a food inspector in 1997, held a bunch of positions since then, including several years as a deputy district manager and district manager in the Springdale district. And I really appreciate Flower Hill setting this up and inviting me to speak with you all today. And I'm especially interested to get feedback from Danielle and Mark about their experiences in obtaining the inspection service that they need to improve their market access, and sort of examine ways that we might continue in our efforts as an agency to improve that process moving forward. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Robert. And yeah, Danielle and Mark are two folks that have recently gone through the process. So, Danielle, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Danielle Carrillo. My husband Max and I own Clark's Custom Meat Company in St. Joseph, Missouri. Definitely considered a small meat processor. We have about 17 team members, including Max and myself, and some part-time people are included in that as well. Our facility does approximately 20 beef and 10 to 15 hogs every week for slaughter and processing. We also have a retail store where we sell a variety of products from fresh cut stuff to value added bratwurst, jerky, snack sticks. A very interesting, unique background to the meat world. My husband and I actually bought Clark's from the original Clark's in the spring of 2023, which also happens to be when we went USDA inspected. And prior to that, my background is actually a registered dietitian nutritionist, graduated from Mizzou in 2017. Just did a total 180 on life. God called us to come back home to St. Joseph. And at the time, the previous owners were looking to sell to a crazy young couple who wanted to take on quite a project and step in to fill out their shoes and maintain the reputation this place is built. So being able to move inspected and service our community better has been wonderful. And we're super grateful to get to hop on here and be a resource of the chaos that it is to jump into this kind of stuff. So thank you, Dave, for inviting me.
Danielle. And Mark, yeah, Mark's a veteran to our roundtables. He's been on one before, but yeah, introduce yourself, Mark. Yeah.
So I'm Mark Siderius, up here in Columbia Falls, Montana, northwest corner of Montana by Glacier National Park, Flathead Lake. So I am the chairman of Glacier Processing Cooperative. We formed that in 2023 with the help of Flower Hill. In 2024, we bought an old plant here, 80-year-old plant, Vandy Vanner Meats and Montana Jerky Company in Columbia Falls. So we're a producer co-op. We've got 45 members now. We took over operations in 2024, so we're into our third year of operations right now. So yeah.
Great. Appreciate it. And before we jump in, Chris, yeah, any thoughts you want to have to get us started? Yeah.
Well, just welcome everybody, and even for our panelists here, just to let you know, folks are tuning in from all over the United States, including our friends down in Puerto Rico. So, we've got a lot of projects. This is valuable information. Dave and I work with a lot of plants that have or are taking the same journey that you all have. So, the information you have to share is extremely valuable. So we appreciate you all being a resource and an asset to us all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Robert, let's start off with you here. Just, from where you sit overseeing the field operations, what does a path to federal inspection look like? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I can tackle that. So the process that we follow is outlined in an FSIS directive. It's available on our website, 5220.1. And it starts when the applicant submits a completed application to our district grant curator. And the grant curator is just a fancy name for the person that's responsible for managing the grant of inspection process. So that individual is going to review that application to make sure it's accurate and complete, identify any missing or inaccurate information, work with the applicant to get the form updated with any additional information that might be required. They'll share some resources with the applicant, specifically our online federal grant of inspection guide that's got all the information they need to walk them through the process. They can also provide paper copies if the applicant doesn't have computer access or just if they request paper copies. Then the grant curator is going to forward an electronic copy of that completed application to our enforcement operations staff. And they're going to do a background inquiry on the business and the responsibly connected persons that are identified on that application. And once that staff notifies the grant curator that there's no basis to refuse inspection based on the results of that check, the grant curator is going to create an establishment profile in our public health information system. They'll reserve an establishment number for a period of 1 year. They'll provide that number to the applicant so the applicant can prepare labels and secure inspection brands if those are going to be needed. Then they'll place the applicant in contact with the frontline supervisor. The frontline supervisor is responsible for the inspection staff in that local area. They'll confirm that the applicant needs inspection for the operations that they want to perform. And they'll set up an on-site review. And during that on-site review, they're going to be looking at the physical premises and the equipment to determine if they comply with regulatory requirements. They'll review the written programs that establishments are required to draft and maintain as part of being an inspected facility. Those requirements are outlined in the regulations, and that information is also available in that guide that the grant curator will share with them. And then the FLS will document the results of that review and the recommendation on a form and send it back to the district manager. They'll also work with the applicant to determine what the core hours of operation will be. So that's when they would provide the free 8 hours of inspection service on a daily basis. And they'll let the applicant know about any concerns or observations that are not compliant with regulatory requirements, so those can be corrected. If there's anything that does need to be corrected, they'll schedule follow-up visits to make sure things are where they need to be prior to moving forward with the grant process. Once they finally get the recommendation, get everything in order, they'll submit that recommendation to issue the grant to the district manager. The district manager will review all the associated documents.
Oh, Robert froze up on us here.
He did mention he
The
was
second.
having connectivity issues this morning.
Yeah. So, well, let's just jump over. So, Mark, let me start with you. So, as you went through this process, what were some of the hurdles and the challenges that you faced?
So our plant, when we took it over, it was a split inspection plant. Montana Jerky Company was under federal inspection, used boxed product for production there, and so we had a federal inspector for that side of things. Vandy Vanner Meats, what's now Glacier Processing, was under state inspection. So, in order to get our members where they needed to be, we either needed to get under federal inspection with everything or under federal and CIS. Once we evaluated more, talked with state inspections and worked through that, we determined we really needed to go to federal. We just needed to go all federal. So our challenges were a little different than many. We had a plant that had been federally inspected fully until 1995. So we had a plant with a lot of deferred maintenance. We had a lot of cleaning. We had a lot of bare stained concrete walls and ceilings that were shabby. Just a lot of stuff that was shabby. Rails that were functional and not in bad shape, but years of yuck on them. So we had a lot of work to do, I guess. At the time, some of the hardest parts that we had were, you know, getting that first federal walkthrough done because with all the grant programs, all the lending programs, everything going on, FSIS, their workload is tremendous. Their staffing levels are not where they should be, nor where they want them to be. So just getting that initial, stage done to give us a baseline of this is where we're at, this is where we need to go, was a hard thing, I guess.
Yeah. So, Robert, glad you're back on with us. But I'm having Mark and Danielle talk about their experience in going through the process. Danielle, yours is a little different because you went under CIS. So, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so again, unique in the fact that we had bought in the shop. So when we first started working here under the Clarks in the fall of 2021, we had just gone state inspected for the state of Missouri. And so I was not, behind the curtain at that time to see the process that took them from the custom exempt that we were prior to the state. But she had done that with the intent of giving us a good springboard when we took over to then move into the CIS USDA level of inspection. And so by the time we had bought the shop, there was a big learning curve for me to see, understand, and really know the whole process of what all entailed with the inspection, specifically the HACCP plan. So not just knowing what we were doing, but why we were doing it. There's a lot of self-study, a lot of trial and error, a lot of me playing catch up to learn all of the things. But beyond that, now educating a full team of people as well as to why we had to do what we did. So we had accepted a grant with the Flower Hill Institute with the previous owners in 2021 that allowed us to get that state inspection level. So putting in those things like we were hearing them talk about with upgrades to the facility, adding more space, getting the head gate, getting a captive bolt to do all the appropriate things that come with inspection and humane handling, along with some other equipment purchases to allow that next upgrade step. And then for, me, next step, once we had the shop was we accepted another grant for some equipment upgrades to get the, CIS or USDA inspection portion. So, I think our biggest blessing in disguise was the fact that we had this established relationship with our state inspectors. they have their necks as much as on the line as we did, in the sense that they are to maintain a federal like inspection. And they get audited as well. And so they wanted to make sure that everything we had already laid out with our state stuff was on par with what needed to happen federally. So they really fought the fight for and with me when we were ready to go USDA. I mean, they weren't even going to, have them come through the door until they felt confident that we were where we needed to be. So we had some pre-meetings with a lot of our state inspected staff to make sure HACCP plans were where they needed to look. The building was what needed to be, what needed to happen. A lot of that happened on our end with state level before we even had USDA come in and go over all of the things. And then that visit was way more smooth and seamless because of that. Still little things here and there that we adjusted and fixed. I definitely learned that it speaks volumes to not just be present in those, but adjust and fix like on the spot. So if they didn't like a little thing in the HACCP plan, I immediately got on the computer and edited it, adjusted it, redid it out for them and let them know, okay, perfect, this is good. So it saved a ton of time, and it showed a lot of, I guess, just effort on their end that we were willing to make those adjustments ASAP to do what they wanted to see.
Great. And Chuck, I see you have a question there, but before we jump to that, Chris, you've gone through the process in your career of getting USDA inspected, and we talked the other day when we were visiting with Mark and Danielle about the importance of having that relationship with the office. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think Robert may be able to chime in on this too, but I really, really encourage people to start that relationship early, whether that is with your state inspection office or federal inspection. Fill out your application forms early. A lot of the projects I work with folks on, whenever we're ready to break ground on a project, I usually encourage people to fill out that 5200 form at that point. Let FSIS office know it's a real project, it's happening, and here's our rough timeline. And allows them to do all the planning and review, as Robert mentioned earlier, and we have to be aware that USDA is, they have payroll and staff and employees just like you do, and on a larger scale in most locations, and they have to plan their people as well. So they have to look at your facility, look at the scheduling, make sure they have people available. So be aware, you can't just apply for inspection today and get it Monday. It's not going to happen that way. Um, and I'm sure there'll be more questions come in. There are some vast differences between FSIS inspection, state inspection, and CIS inspection, and the different procedures that can happen. And maybe Robert can talk through the CIS portion of that a little bit more. But there is a direct relationship between the state and FSIS office, and there has to be some relationships in place. There's only a handful of states that do that still right now. But there has to be some true relationships in place between the FSIS office, the state meat inspection office, and your plant operators. So again, engage with us all early. Dave and I work with projects that are literally ideas on a napkin all the way through operation and implementation, and we all want to help you through those processes. We know it's hard. It can be overwhelming at times just to know where to start and where to go. But there are people out here to help you, so don't be afraid to ask.
Yep. Yeah, I see Danielle and Mark were both nodding your head too on that. Mark, yeah, talk about the work you did to establish a good relationship. Yeah.
So, as I said, we had a federal inspector for the jerky side, but the jerky side was just, further processing for us. So we were in an actively running plant, as was Danielle when she was doing this. So it's a bit of a challenge when you've got the daily work to get done plus all of this. So it kind of makes somebody outside, somebody that they're not dependent on or not highly dependent on for that daily operation, has to head this up. So for my end of thing, I ended up, on walkthroughs, I ended up addressing the 5,200 forms and all of those to do that, even though I wasn't the person with the knowledge, but I learned real fast to do that, just to make the rest of the plant do what it needed to do, and that was to continue to make money to pay bills. And so, those walkthroughs, those were a challenge because FSIS, they're not going to give you a list. It's up to you to make your list as you go through. It's up to you to note those deficiencies and basically be ready to address those and to figure out how to address those deficiencies. So, it was a lot of work in that. And then, like in our case, we hit that as retirement buyouts were going on. So we started off working with Dr. Legg in that, and we got, 80% to the finish line, and Dr. Legg sends the notice out that his last day, is coming up, and this is it. And then we were in this situation of, Dr. Legg's successor was two interim folks. I don't think either one of them was really sold on wanting that job or that responsibility. So it kind of made us pivot and start a new dialogue, and figure that out. So it was a challenging thing at that time and more hurdles with it. But, like Chris said, that proactive approach and jumping on that, to start the ball rolling, even knowing, okay, we're not going to be ready for a year, but at least start the paperwork, at least get in the system because the grant curators, everybody, they're great people and they remember you. I mean, they remember and they take note of that. So as you make progress, they're checking that off and taking notes. So
We talked the other day when we were planning this that, and you both mentioned that, yeah, you get your deficiencies, but it's really important to identify then what needs to be done. And you talked about that a bit, Mark, and trying to be a little more specific. Danielle, yeah, did you go through some of that as well?
Yeah, and again, I really have to thank our state inspectors with that. So, they would actually do the walkthroughs with us, um, you know, because again, they have a standard to uphold to make sure that they can maintain the CIS approval label, whatever you want to call it. They would point out to us that like this, wouldn't fly with state. It's not going to fly with inspection. You need to get this fixed and upgraded. And here's some examples of other shops in our state and what they've done to do that. Now, while that was super helpful, that still at the end of the day is a hard pill to swallow on some of that stuff. I mean, this is also an older shop with equipment older than I am. And, some of these things that you're putting a lot of financial investment to, you don't get to see an ROI on. I mean, you get to continue to function as inspection and obviously food safety, which is super important. But, these are major expenses to get to that next step and goal. And so we've gotten creative where we can to make those fixes happen in a safe manner, but also have been, rewriting the budget to factor in this stuff has to happen to maintain and also get us through the next couple decades without having constant repairs and maintenance issues on it. So the state inspector relationship for us was really, really key. In fact, part of their process is every 3 to 5 years, they do a food safety assessment or an FSA. Just got to go through that this year. Super fun, but the whole intent is to, inspect deep all through the HACCP plans. They watched everything we did. They did an in-depth walkthrough of the whole shop. And it gives you the chance to, I mean, yeah, we still walked away with a good amount of NRs, but it gives you the chance to see the issues and address them. And now because of that, weekly, bi-weekly as a team and not just me, right, training up my team to see and know those issues. So now they are doing the walkthroughs with me or instead of me. And they're able to identify stuff before it gets to, red level that we have a quarterly FDA, or excuse me, not FDA, federal inspector come in and walk through and give us, an NR for something that we just didn't know we needed to be looking for. So it's been beneficial.
Good. And Robert, like we say, being specific on deficiencies, but from your perspective, what are some of the other things that kind of hold up, slow down an application?
Sure. Yeah, I would say probably the biggest things that I see are incomplete or unsupported documentation for their food safety systems. A lot of times new establishments require a lot of assistance with HACCP design and where they get the supporting documentation to support the controls that they have in place for the different hazards that they're trying to address. So I would just suggest, to deal with that, be aware of the available resources, including the ones that are published by FSIS to help you through that process. Get help. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially after you've established that relationship with the frontline supervisor. Make sure you're clear on the feedback that they're giving you when they're looking at those programs and identifying deficiencies. Make sure you understand those. We also see a lot of times, facilities that just aren't quite ready for inspection. Maybe the construction's not quite complete. Maybe there's some product flow issues or structural concerns. That's another reason why it's good to start those conversations early before you maybe have everything in place and laid out, so you can kind of understand what some of the things that need to be addressed really are. So again, ask detailed questions. Make sure you understand the feedback that the frontline supervisor is giving you. Let's see. I would also say just slow communication with the district office or grant curator. Sometimes, folks on either side aren't quite as responsive as maybe they need to be. I would recommend that you establish those relationships early. Get to know your grant curator, get to know your frontline supervisor, and understand who the deputy district manager is that oversees that area too. So if things aren't moving the way they need to, you've got somebody else that you've become acquainted with and you can reach out to and help get them moving. So other than that, I would say probably just issues with background checks. So the statutes, the Poultry Products Inspection Act and the Federal Meat Inspection Act do have a clause that say if you've been convicted of 2 food-related misdemeanors or any felony, that you may, FSIS may have concerns about your fitness to hold a grant. Doesn't mean you can't get one, but it does slow things down because usually there's a process that you have to work through to enter into some sort of consent agreement where, okay, we'll abide by these rules and, for a period of time, and FSIS will verify that the terms of that agreement are met and the grant will be issued anyway. That information has to be spelled out on the application. I would also say make sure that you list any convictions of responsibly connected officials, just so we don't delay the process, because it's going to come up anyway as part of the background check. So.
Great. Before we jump into the questions, one last thing here, because talking about the resources available, and Danielle, you mentioned the other day that you relied heavily with the American Association of Meat Processors. So explain that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a huge untapped resources by a lot of meat processors. Not only does their website have sufficient resources in HACCP plans and the supporting documentation to go with it, so starting from the ground zero and trying to come up with stuff, it's really good. It's very, very helpful. But in addition to that, genuinely being involved within AMP, we went through a little hiccup issue with some inspection stuff at the beginning of last year. And when I felt like I hit the brick wall and I had no idea how to get myself out of this with supporting documentation, and figuring out what the next step was. It was a unique situation. So I've talked all about great things with the CIS program and having that relationship with state inspectors. Downside to that is they're not federal. And so they don't see as many cases and circumstances and situations that your federal guides do. And so we had something they had never seen before. Feds had seen it, wasn't a problem, but they just so happened to be getting audited at the same time as we had this issue come up. So there was a nervous desire to want to ask that question and cause any issues. And so we were kind of getting put in the dark with any help with the state at that time. I ended up reaching out to AMP, and they have a excellent outreach coordinator, Miss Abby Davison. She was God sent. She helped me through every single part of it because, again, they see the whole U.S., and so they had seen this situation before. She had a ton of resources and supporting documentation. and compiled it very professionally to be able to pass that on to our state inspectors. And also, I mean, if you didn't know, they have a Ask FSIS on their website. And so I also went on there to just further my support behind the case we were trying to make, and plainly laid out the situation, said what we had provided for supporting documentation, and it was immediate, yep, shouldn't be a problem, write this in your corrective action and move on. So there are pros and cons to both of that, but learning my resources and just educating better on HACCP plans and supporting documentation was very, very important. Highly recommend.
Great. And AMP is a very vital part of our technical assistance network. Abby has been a great resource. We also rely on American Meat Science Association. They give a lot of help with folks on HACCP plans. So again, reach out to us. So, Chris, I'm going to finally we'll get Chuck's question answered here.
Yeah, let me hit 2 points
So,
real quick. You mentioned AMSA, and they do have the Meat Locker website that is a very valuable website with just a ton of resources. So if you all are operating a meat plant, you should know that website. Dr. Maddock and the team over at AMSA maintain that. They built it in the last couple of years, and they maintain that. Just a wonderful, wonderful resource. And Danielle brought up a good point earlier when she was talking. She mentioned the word budget. Super important when you all are looking at not just operating your normal everyday business, but if you're looking at going inspected, whether it's state, federal, or CIS or TA, you must relook at your budgets. It's not the same as running a custom plant. You need to understand. I use the term cost of compliance a lot, and a lot of folks, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but there is a cost to stay in compliance with food safety inspection guidelines, whether that is at the state level or federal level, and you need to budget for that. Danielle mentioned, she's probably the one doing a lot of the extra paperwork. You have a lot of different things. You're going to have plant maintenance, you're caulking, sealing, painting, cleaning. All these things have to happen regularly. Where you were when you were a custom operation, you may not have paid as much attention to it, but now you have other people paying attention to it. You can't have holes in your walls and ceiling causing condensation. You can't have rust. You can't have, things dripping or stuff building up in cracks and crevices. You have to keep all of that maintained. So when we talk about cost and cost of compliance, there is truly a cost there that we can help you understand what that budget should look like depending on your volume, employees, plant size. We work with people on understanding operational cost all the time. So again, reach out if you're in the middle of this and trying to figure out what that cost look like, because there is truly a cost. So, and Danielle and Mark also mentioned, they are very proactive people. Dave and I have worked with them for years now. If you're looking at going inspected, you have to be the proactive person leading that inspection initiative. You can't expect for someone else to come in and push that for your business. It's your business. You have to manage it, and you have to be the driver of the process. Dave and I have people reach out all the time and say, just how long does it take? How long is it going to take me to become inspected? I'm like, well, could be 3 months, could be 12 months, depends on you and depends on, how much work you need to do and where your food safety plans are at and your SOPs. There's a lot of variables in that, and that window it can be longer than 12 months, depends on the person and the project. But, that's why we really encourage you all to start early to understand what it's going to take and what you're going to have to do to get through that inspection process and to obtain that grant of inspection. So I wanted to throw that out there, Dave, before we went
no,
dive.
that's great. It's a great segue because you talk about the cost of compliance and the budget. And Chuck's question kind of hits the point of the story is, how has inspection allowed your business to grow and become more profitable? So, yeah, Danielle, why don't you start that off?
Yeah. I wish I could give you exact numbers off the top of my head. I'm not that good, but truly, before we really noticed this uptick trend after 2020 that there's a lot more direct farm, sellers and people wanting to take their farm to the next level, right? I mean, they're in this ag industry. They want to make their land and every single part of that work for them. And so a huge part of that is being able to not just grow a customer base of people willing to get, half beefs, whole hogs, et cetera. But, what about those other people that are not going to budget the couple grand that it is to invest in that? And so they needed the option to do this, resale for individual cuts for smaller volumes to hit the farmers markets up to start their online businesses because that has absolutely taken off as well. To be able to partner with their local schools, restaurants, communities. So we had hit that point where we were getting enough interest from farmers or people that were, just bringing us their custom lot, if you would say so, and then they would take their other stuff to a different processor to resell. And so having that opportunity now has been great. With the state side initially, it was helpful, but where we happen to be located is right on the corner of Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska. And so we have quite a bit of customers that were hitting that borderline, and we were of no use to them because we couldn't then, they couldn't drive their stuff back and resell it where it needed to go. It also limited any opportunity for doing online sales and shipment on their end. So that has been very helpful to us, especially I can think of like core-based farmers that had been with us for years, and their story was what I shared earlier in that they only gave us a portion of what they were processing at other places to have that resale opportunity. It also allowed us to use them in a marketing strategy in the sense of, if you're looking for local, we've got the people to do it. And then I can resell some of their product within my store to kind of get them in the door to start with something, to taste what that difference is, to hit that opportunity. And then maybe after that point, they're ready to go ahead and commit to the half or whole or whatever that looks like. So again, sorry, I don't have specific numbers, but it's really opened the door and opportunity for quite a bit of our local farmers and consumers to hit that.
Great. And Mark?
So yeah, I mean similar story, we're the fastest growing area in Montana, but we're right next to Spokane, Washington, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, big growth as well. I mean, when we made that change, it allowed, producers to expand in those markets. One of the big things it did with like Montana Jerky Company, our whole muscle jerky is a shelf stable product. It allowed producers their private labeling jerky, but they're going to farmers markets now outside of the area. They're like the king of farmers market because they have a shelf stable product, you know. I mean, everybody else, their sales are dragging through farmers market as I understand, and until the very end because people don't want to buy that refrigerated product until they're going home. You have shelf stable product, you're the king of the market because they can walk buy that and walk it around all day. And so just little sideline, things like that are the difference between a customer coming to you and not coming to you, I guess. I mean, if we essentially have become a part of their vision for their business, I guess. And I think Danielle would say the same thing. You're all of a sudden a part of their vision for the business, and it makes all the difference in customer loyalty in that producer base, I guess.
Great. So,
Dave, I
I
have
see
one more
Catherine.
comment. I have one more comment
Yep.
to add on that real quick. And it's a different perspective, but everyone has to think about where your risk level is now going. If you're a toll processor and you're just doing a service for a fee, your risk level is dramatically different from being a restaurant supplier, a school food supplier, a retail sales supplier. Your risk level has exponentially grown when you dive into these new markets, and so you have to be prepared. And FSIS staff, although you don't always think about it in the same relationship, the staff is there to try to manage your risk with you, and nobody wants to get anybody sick. And Dave and I have to tell people all the time, you have to imagine, the food you process is feeding your kids, your neighbors' kids, your grandparents, your parents, and you do not want them sick. So your risk level is growing exponentially as you increase the type of business you're doing and the product you're putting out and the locations you're sending that product. So your food safety needs to grow with that risk. So you need to understand how to do it in a good, safe manner, keep things clean, and always remember you're only going to be as good as your weakest employee. You have to keep everybody trained. You have to make sure everybody is doing it in a good, safe manner and is complying with your food safety guidelines that you work with USDA to set up. So I wanted to throw that in there, Dave. It's a little. We talk about risk management a lot with processors, and we have really seen some major ordeals come up in the last 4.5 years we've been working on this. And risk management can be natural disasters that happen. It can be foodborne illnesses that happen, and you need to be, as a business owner, you need to think about all of those. So reach out for help and get the help to make sure you're protected.
Absolutely. I see Catherine, our friend from University of Puerto Rico, has got a question here. Is there a simple guide publicly available for the inspection solicitation process and the key elements to obtain and keep federal inspection? And Robert, that's one for you, but it'll also give you a chance also to talk about the new small processors action plan too that the secretary's announced. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Dave. And I think you guys are going to post some resources for these folks.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would say the best starting point is the apply for grant of inspection page on the FSIS website. Dave will share the link with you all, but it walks you through everything that you need to do to get the process started. It has an online application that you can submit. It's got a list of resources that help you through the process, like a HACCP guidance webpage that has a guidebook for the preparation of your HACCP plans, walks you through the regulatory requirements that you need to be familiar with. So it's like it's a bunch of resources within a resource. I would say that apply for grant of inspection webpage is the best starting point. And Dave, you mentioned the small processors action plan. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to explain a little bit about that. So that was announced by Secretary Rawlins in June, and the goal there is just to make it easier for small businesses to understand our requirements and navigate the grant process, and to maintain compliance. And so it was developed with the fact that small and very small processors make up the majority of the plants that we deal with as FSIS. And so there's really three things that we're doing to help processors overcome those challenges that they face. And the first is direct support. So this year we're putting $20 million toward cutting overtime and holiday inspection fees that small and very small plants have to pay. So that's money back in their operations. Those reductions are retroactive to October 5th of last year. For businesses that are looking to grow, USDA has $60 million available through the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program, which that's not run from FSIS, it's rural development, but there is a share set aside for small processors. And then the second piece is just about FSIS making its expectations clear and predictable. We feel like, hey, when an establishment operator has a question, they should get a quick and meaningful response. So we're doing some things to expand our direct access to experts and building up tools like our small plant help desk. And Ask FSIS has been revised to make it more user-friendly for small and very small plants as well. We've also introduced an online option on our website for filing appeals, where establishments can track that process and see where the request is, just to make sure things don't get lost and unanswered. We're rewriting a lot of our notices and directives in plain language, so you don't have to hire somebody to interpret them for you. And then we're just taking a hard look at how we define what a small plant is, because those definitions go back to 1996, and they don't really reflect today's landscape. So we published a notice of advanced notice of proposed rulemaking on that, solicited comments, and then thirdly, just how we show up in the field, Dave. We've started moving a lot of our leadership positions closer to the establishments that we regulate. So historically, you've had deputy district managers at the district office. We're starting to move those folks out in the field to where they're more accessible to these small and very small operators. So the goal there is just to work through issues more expeditiously. and we can have a senior leadership on-site presence more readily if needed. So those are some of the things that we're trying to accomplish with that plan.
Great. And as long as you're talking about cross-agency cooperation there, yeah, all of you that are on the round table here that do have your grant of inspection, you should have received an email from FSA this week with the SPUR program, which is opportunity to get about $53 per head process to help offset the cost of acquiring cattle. So, folks, be sure and give us your questions. We got about 15 minutes left here, and you got some great resources here that would love to answer your questions. One thing you mentioned, yeah, NRs, which are going to come up. And what advice? I'll start off with you, Robert. What advice do you have for folks on how do you handle an NR? What's the best process and way to get those resolved?
Yeah, well, I'd like to start out by just saying, we have a lot of small and very small operators that, their preference would be if their inspector just kind of pointed out a non-compliance and gave them an opportunity to deal with it without documenting it. But really, that's really not the best way to look at it. The NR being documented makes sure that there's a record of what the observations were, and it gives the establishment an opportunity to appeal the non-compliance if they don't think it's a valid finding. So it prevents people from regulating without, documenting and providing that pathway to deal with a poor decision, which happens from time to time. So, rule number one, if you disagree with a regulatory determination, please appeal. We encourage that. There's a process for that. Number two, I guess I would say is if you read the NR and it's not clear what the non-compliance is, don't hesitate to have a discussion with your inspector or your frontline supervisor and understand what they're trying to tell you with that. And then number three, I would say just make sure that you've kind of talk through what you plan to do in terms of corrective actions with your inspector and make sure that meets the mark. I'd be interested to hear Mark and Danielle's insight into their experience with that.
Yep. Go ahead. So start off, Mark. Yeah.
So, yeah, when we moved the entire facility under federal, versus an exited state, it was a lot different way of looking at it from the federal side of things. The state, it seemed like when we were receiving NRs, they were, disciplinary, pointing out that we were bad. When we moved to federal, it was more of a partnership of, okay, I'm going to write this NR because, I haven't been doing my job as well as I could keeping an eye on this, and you haven't done your job as well as you could to keep this in, to clean this, to do whatever you need to do maintenance. So the NR system, with the federal side really became more of a partnership, I guess, and the success is built off of not writing NRs, not on writing NRs pointing out, oh, that plant needs a lot of work, that plant needs a lot. So it's two different methods of thought is what we encountered on the NR side of things. And, oftentimes our NRs are more often than not record keeping things. When you go to federal or CIS, your record keeping, it goes up a whole bunch. If you're custom right now, that record keeping side of things, it's night and day difference. Prepare to spend about 70% of your day in that, I guess. But, a lot of it is record keeping, and oftentimes those NRs, once they're drafted, they're already resolved. We have to submit a corrective action, but, we corrected the form, we changed how the next day was done, and that NR is done, So it is, like Robert said, just a record of, the discussion that was held and what was decided on.
Danielle, you've been nodding your head there. So, yeah.
So yeah, you're talking to a type A oldest daughter who hated getting in trouble. And so NRs were a mental state for me at first. I totally agree with what he was saying as a mindset. I hated them because it felt like, I had failed. I wasn't doing something right in the sense that you'll learn too. This is a foundational thing that took me a huge mindset rewarp with inspection. You can look at that HACCP plan 20 times. Your inspectors can look at them 20 times. You can have other people look at them 20 times, and there is still something you're going to find that needs to be corrected and changed a couple months down the road, and then a couple months down the road after that. And it frustrated me to know, and that like I thought we had this perfect. I thought this, has already been reviewed by so many people. How are we still finding errors and problems? But it is a living, growing, evolving plan that changes with time and personnel and what you're trying to do. So not taking it personally was a huge thing for me because I really did it first. It really made me mad. Eventually, I was able to work the fact that, like, was mentioned earlier with Chris, that this is people's lives and food safety. And this isn't about me and what I think is right or wrong in the sense of me trying to prove myself. This is making sure that everything is safe to consume by anybody who touches it in any way, shape, or form. And so really rewarping that mindset to say, yeah, this is just documentation that this had to change and why. And to be totally transparent, sometimes I still do kind of question and, conversate that back with the inspector to say, was it necessary to be at this level, or should we have had conversations before to improve this at such a time? And with being CIS as well, kind of that flip side con is the fact that they have to do those things to cover their butts too. So when they get audited, it doesn't look good if you never had any documentation of things going wrong to fix, right? If it was all just hearsay or verbal, then there's not a lot to pull on if something comes up later. And so I don't love them still, but I'm way more comfortable now with NRs and able to understand the purpose behind them is to grow everybody to be better and keep both, like Mark said, us and the inspectors responsible and accountable for what's going on.
Go ahead,
And can I
Chris.
just say that I appreciate Danielle saying that this is people's lives and this is food safety. As someone who's been intimately involved with a lot of foodborne illness outbreaks, that really drives home the importance of why we have these food safety system requirements and what we're trying to do with them, and the importance of documenting that non-compliance and getting those issues resolved. So I appreciate that comment.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Chris. You
Yeah,
you
I was
wanted to
gonna,
add something? Yeah.
Danielle hit a lot of good points, and Robert followed him up. It's this can be a tough business. Processing any type of food can be a tough business, but everything you put out, you want it to be safe, as Danielle mentioned. And I really appreciate her saying you can't take these NRs personally. You have to take them serious, but you don't have to take them personally. Don't get mad, don't get upset. Use it as a point to make things better for yourself, the plant, the inspectors. Let's make it better. Dave and I have also had the unfortunate opportunity to work with folks that don't take the NR seriously. I encourage you all, do not let them pile up. We've had plants that come to us and have 30 or 40 outstanding NRs, and that's not a good place to be. You don't want to be there. Mark mentioned, you want to stay on top of this. Ideally, if you do get an NR, you've already corrected it. You're working on it. You're trying to make it better, but do not neglect them. If you neglect the NRs, it will not end well. If you don't want to deal with this stuff, do not choose this business to work in. Choose something else. Stay custom. If you don't think you can handle the stress or the paperwork, stay custom or pick another field of work. It is tough. So I know we've got another question from Chuck. I'll key that one up if you want, Dave.
Go ahead.
Are FSIS inspection requirements for poultry different from other animals, and are resources available specifically for poultry? Robert, I'll key you up for that one if that's okay. You're in the poultry capital down there.
That's fine, Chris. Can you run that back for me again one more time?
Are FSIS inspection requirements for poultry different from other animals, and are resources available specifically for poultry?
Yeah, so yes to both. The poultry regulations are in 9 CFR 381. The red meats 300. So there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of similarities, but you're dealing with different pathogens of concern. There's some differences in the way we regulate those pathogens. So, like with red meat, livestock, E. coli is an adulterant. That's the primary pathogen of concern, I guess, in the slaughter operation. There's zero tolerance for it. Salmonella is the primary pathogen of concern in poultry slaughter, but it's not an adulterant. So, if there is some amount of salmonella, it doesn't mean that the poultry is not eligible for commerce. So those are two huge differences in terms of the way we go about regulating those industries. There are FSIS guidelines available on the website for both developing HACCP plans for red meat and for poultry and for complying with salmonella expectations and E. coli expectations. So those resources are embedded in that apply for grant of FSIS inspection link that they're going to share with you. Again, there's a lot of resources buried within those resources, but short answer, yes, they are different, and yes, there are FSIS resources available.
And one thing I wanted to cover here before we get off, because we brought this up earlier, but you talked about the conditional grant is in the final grant. Robert, explain the differences of when you get that conditional grant and the 90-day period to get that final grant. Yeah.
Sure. So when you get the initial conditional grant of inspection, FSI is going to wait at least 90 days to, number one, allow the establishment time to validate their HACCP systems. And that's just to make sure that the system that they've designed and implemented can be implemented in such a way that it controls the hazards that have been identified in that HACCP plan. That may involve, just looking at their compliance for that 90-day period to make sure that they're doing what they said they were going to do in the HACCP plan and that it's achieving the intended results. It may involve repeatedly testing the validity of that HACCP system. And at the end of that 90 days, if the HACCP plans have been properly validated and there's no significant compliance issues, a final grant of inspection will be issued. From the perspective of, what would happen if they're not able to validate those HACCP systems and they have compliance issues, it's probably not going to look a whole lot different from an establishment that had a grant for an extended period of time. There would be, your typical enforcement actions, opportunities to bring yourself back into compliance and that sort of thing. I guess from a theoretical perspective, it would be easier for FSIS to get to a point where they could say, you know what, we're going to initiate the process to withdraw the grant. It's still an administrative legal process that we would go through, but we're going to work with establishments to make sure that they understand what they need to do to comply and meet those requirements and give them an opportunity to do that.
Great. Appreciate it. Chris, once again, an hour gets away from us here pretty quick. So let's just go around and have some final comments. And Danielle, I'll start off with you.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for having me on here. And I'm always welcome to answer any follow-up emails if there's anything that you guys have specific to related things. But good luck to you. And I do want to emphasize, the comments about if this isn't something you're ready for the level of stress, don't do it. Do something else because it's going to require a lot of attention to detail, a lot of knowledge of your HACCP plans and supporting documentations, and really knowing and understanding the science and support that goes with that. Obviously, it's something I don't regret. Glad we did it. It's been a good learning opportunity, but lots of challenges come with this journey.
Great. Mark?
So I would just say, for us, I mean, there's no going back now, coming under inspection, getting through that. I mean, our customers, our producer members, they wouldn't settle for going back at all. It seemed like an insurmountable task as we did it. Once we actually got under inspection, now we're truly operating, I would say, more like a partnership with FSIS, it's a dialogue back and forth, it's asking questions of that frontline supervisor if that's who you need. So it's a big hurdle to get over it, but once you make it over it, you just kind of have this sigh of relief. I would say, AMP was brought up, great resource. Flower Hill here putting this on, great resource. Most states have an organization, and the meat processing world, it's a world that I never worked in before, but you don't find very many other establishments doing this that aren't more than happy to answer the phone and answer questions and help you, because it's really not that competitive a world in the small and very small processors. It's just everybody's working towards survival, and it's a labor of love. So, the resources are there. I mean, don't feel like you have to do all this by yourselves. Don't feel like the inspection services are the enemy or it's a combative thing, because it's not at all.
Appreciate that. And Robert, while I call on you, I just draw people's attention. That slide there, that QR code will take you right to the FSIS site that has a lot of the things that we talked about. So, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Dave, and I appreciate Mark's last comment. Yeah, FSIS, just be aware that everybody from the inspection level on up through headquarters completely recognizes the important role that small processors play in our food supply, and they want the success of the small and very small industry. And we're working hard to improve the service delivery that we give to businesses of that size. The people within FSIS are just people like anyone else. Don't be afraid, if you're interested in pursuing federal inspection, to reach out and get to know your grant curator, reach out and get to know your FLS, and you'll see that they're going to do what they can do to help you through the process and make this thing work. So.
Great. Chris?
All great points. I know we're running out of time. We could spend easily another hour or two talking about these subjects, from costs and budgets and issues, but that's what Dave and I are here for. So if you all have a specific project you want to talk about, please reach out to us. Let us assist you. And if we need to bring in other resources, Dave and I are always about phoning a friend and bringing in other people. So we want to get you the right assistance when you need it. And we also understand that your needs change from day to day, your problems change from day to day, and your bottlenecks change from day to day. So we have a lot of resources available. You have a lot of resources available, and let us all work with you and help make sure you're successful.
Yeah. Jessica says there's a problem with the QR code, so I apologize for that. But when we put this on our website, the recording will have the links all there. So just hang tight. Nikki usually gets that up in about a day, and I'll work with her to make sure we have that there. Just two things. Number one is you will get the survey. Let us know how we did and let us know what you want us to talk about. And then we don't have the date set on this one yet, but our next roundtable is going to be on It's Almost All Edible. We're going to have some folks on to talk about marketing edible offal. So one of them is Chef Sandoval from here in Denver, who I've been at a couple of events that he's catered, and there's some pretty tasty stuff out there. And then also someone from Hickory Nut Gap Farm in North Carolina, and they're doing a lot of products with ancestral blends and blending in offal. So I think you'll find that informative. So stay tuned. Again, thanks everybody for being with us today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing working with you. So have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.